This is the Irish Rally podcast brought to you in association with Tech and Tools, your dedicated tools provider focusing on diagnostic test equipment and specialised tools. Visit Techntools.ie for more information, and SVS Productions. Now on the Irish Rally podcast, we delve into a little bit of nostalgia, kind of the issue being forced, because we didn't expect to see this particular geezer appear after a 25-year hiatus. And all of a sudden, up in Corky yesterday, not only does he appear, yeah, he finishes as well, does all right. It is, of course, Mr. James Leckey. James, how are you doing? Welcome to the Irish Rally podcast.
Hi, Kev. How are you?
I'm flying now. Listen, it's a real pleasure and privilege to have you on. I think for a while, people might have been sending out a little search party to see where's James Leckey gone in the world of rallying. And you did a pretty good job of keeping a low profile from a rallying point of view, even though business was obviously booming and pretty good for you over the years. But I suppose the first question we have to ask is why the return?
I've got to give credit to a friend of mine, Derek McGarty. I went to the Sparks do. It's a charity do. Drew Wiley sort of thing runs it, and a really good do. And I was talking to Gary White, and he's got an R5, and he said he was doing a test down in Kirkerson. Sure, what would the harm in coming down and taking a wee drive in it? And I got there, and Derek was there, and he took me out. Well, his son Michael took me out. He's a fit driver. And I just thought, well, you know, this is nice. And I missed it. And I have a bit of time on my hands, and I just thought, well, why not? And he said that Kenny McKinstry had a couple of right-handers for rental, and hemmed and hawed and thought about it, and just thought, right, well, I'll give Kenny a call. I'm like, what would the plan? I kind of wanted to take a run around in the woods, and there's a wee rally, 5 Mile Town Rally on next weekend, and he said, well, why don't we do a shakedown at Kirkerson and go out and do the 5 Mile Town Rally? And I thought, well, I'll scratch the itch, and see what happens.
Yeah, so obviously that's not, I suppose, a bad way to kind of set yourself up. There's a bit of loose stuff there and all. Not quite the same, but as close as you're going to get in terms of a competitive recce, I suppose.
Oh, no, it was good. No, I have to say it was really good because, I haven't been out in a car for 25 years, and there's a lot to forget, and there's a lot of change in the cars. And the R5s are not like the Impreza, the Legacy, or even the old Sierra Cosworth taxis. There's definitely a lot of change, and I wasn't on the car yesterday. I didn't get onto it. I think it would take a bit longer to do that, just braking lines and things like that. I found myself, coming up as hard as I could, braking for the corner and then driving to the corner again. There was plenty of room left in it. But I enjoyed it, and it was a good test from the point of view that there was a lot of change of surface. There was dry tarmac, there was wet tarmac, there was gravel, good bit of gravel on it, both straight and a few corners. There was mud, there was moss, there was concrete. So it was nice that way. It was only XY access for the engineers. There was no Z axis activity, no jumps or yumps. But still, it was good to get out and just. My goal was just to get familiar with the car, and get a taste of it and try not to take any corners off her. And it's a bit like a racing circuit. There's plenty of runoffs. Now there are a few bits of space you can catch, but it's mostly runoffs. If you run over a tire, it's not too bad, and so on. So it was a good test to get out, and no delf broken. So it was good that way.
Yeah, well, James, it's interesting because most people that I chat to here who've gone into an R5, whether they've maybe never driven a whole lot before, or whether they've come from a modified rear-wheel drive into an R5, there's two things they always talk about. One is the braking, and you mentioned it there, braking and then accelerating again. And the second thing is launch control. So obviously that was something you had to get used to as well.
Yeah, Kenny took me down a lane on Wednesday last week, and he said he wouldn't let me out in the car without having tried the launch control. The launch control is essentially a button that just limits the revs. So when you're sitting on the start line and you do hit the popping and banging on, then when you put the boot down, you're not revving her to the absolute limit, and it keeps it down sensible but enough to drive you off. So Tried it a few times, seemed to be all right, and it worked all right in the day. The launch control's nice now. It takes you off the line. There's no mistakes, you know. There's no faffing around. But I have to say the two things I find most impressive for the wee car is the brakes and just the turning in. I mean, the advancements in the braking technology, the suspension, which I'll find out more about next weekend, I'm sure. But under braking, just superb, and turning in. Even with the brakes hard on, she'll turn in. You know, she steers incredibly well, and it was. I mean, it's like going back to the olden days. It's just you just have to keep, you know, breaking through barriers, and going past your comfort zone every time, and then finding out she'll do it and do it and do it. And where there was open space, my temptation was of old to pendulum the car to get her to turn in, and you don't need to do that. And what I found was there was a lot of areas where there was just, you know, tires on either side. You had no room to move, and you had straight into a square right or square left. And you had to just brake in a straight line and turn her in, and it was much more efficient. Yeah. All that other stuff, the sliding and drifting, just a waste of time. But good fun.
Yeah, so you had to maybe sacrifice some of the flamboyance that we were accustomed to seeing you do in the 90s to maybe just, you know, move on with the times as such. But I would say the obvious technological advancements are clear for everyone to see. But of its time, when you got into a Legacy for the first time, or into an Impreza, and take the technological side out of it, they obviously were of its time too, and you had those things to get used to. So the big thing, as you know, is time and seat time, and especially when you're 25 years away. But at least you had that kind of to go off that, all right, okay, it's not today or yesterday, but I know this will take time, and you're mature enough to know that. Obviously, if you're not by now, you'd be in trouble, wouldn't you?
Thank you for that.
Yeah. You know, everyone doesn't get it as easy now, James, on this podcast. So don't worry. There's a few curveballs coming in here shortly. But anyway, to sum up the day itself, you obviously enjoyed it. You came home 19th. Stephen McCauley's alongside you, a man who obviously was there in maybe the early to mid 90s as well when it was all kicking off. So all in all, like pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, it was a great day, and when I got out of it, I stayed away from it altogether. Didn't go and watch, didn't go and spectate or anything. I got completely out of it, just focused on work and built a wee business up and so on, which I sold 2 years ago. So going back to it yesterday was just a great day. Just a whole pile of people I haven't seen for years and years and years, and all, you know, just really nice to see them. And everybody's very chatty. A lot of the friends came down and, you know, had a good laugh and so on. So it's just generally socially a really good day yesterday and good fun. Stephen McCauley, you mentioned there, he was actually in my class in school.
Right.
Yeah, complete vagabond, you know. So, but great to get him out. And he did a few events with me years and years and years ago. But then he tended to migrate onto the international scene. You know, would spend a lot of time overseas doing it. And I had a couple of other boys, you know, good lads, navigated for me. But this time around, I thought I'd just give him a bell, just since there's only the two events we were thinking of doing, and we'll take it from there. So that was the sort of thing, but a great day, good fun. Yeah.
So, look, you mentioned you were in school with him, you were keeping in touch with him, no doubt, over that period of time. And in general, how much of an interest or attention did you kind of pay to rallying in those intervening years, James?
None at all. Really, none at all. I would keep an odd eye on the WRC stuff that was going on. And more, for some reason, more laterally, but in the intervening years, no, work was a really big focus. I was designing and developing products for kids with special needs.
Yeah.
And growing the business.
This is, sorry to cut across you, but just to give people the clearer picture. So this was simply called Leckey, and you're known for being a bit of a design head, and you built quite an empire. So this started back in 82 or 83 or something, yeah?
83, that's right, yeah. And I just built it up over the years. Around the early 90s, I got a bit more time in my hands. I built a good team, and I thought I'd go and do a bit of rallying and enjoyed it. But really, from the noughties on, from 2000 on, I really focused on it and developed it and grew it overseas and built it up to be what was really a really enjoyable business to be in, and it was nice. It was global. I have a lot of friends overseas now through that I keep in touch with, and it was just a lovely industry. But it was time for me to get out. I became the barrier to growth, so I moved it on, and it's now in good hands with a really good international global company. One of the bigger ones, and they're doing very well with it. So I'm pleased with that.
And your name is still to it, is it? Even though you're going.
It is. The brand stayed.
Well, that's nice, like.
that was part of the value of it. I mean, the brand, the name
Yeah.
Leckey in that industry, in that, I would say, that community, and Firefly, which was an online sub business, they would be known globally and very, very well. And I've kept 2 projects out, and I have a small design company now that I'm doing it. And it just, some of them cross over in the same industry. So when the name goes out, people recognize it instantly, and we're welcome with open doors, which is, you know, it's nice. It's nice to do that.
Yeah. High Viso, that's one you're involved in now, is it?
Well, you see, the whole thing came about. I sold the business just as COVID was hitting.
Yeah.
And a lot of I had a team of about 25 designers, and they were all furloughed.
Okay.
So I was kicking my heels with nothing to do, and I decided I'd get involved in PPE. And we got in touch with one of the research hospitals up here, one of the centers, and they said, look, let's design some PPE equipment. And we got stuck in, and we spent a couple of years, well, a year and a half doing that. And that's a development project. I mean, you won't see the fruits of that for years to come, because lots of tests and stuff to go on. But so we started a company, High Viso, just doing PPE equipment for, I suppose, just get improved protection. It was a mask with a guard, a face guard with a mask involved, a collective, and it worked very, very well. Passed a lot of tests and so on. But as soon as people stopped wearing masks, the steam ran out and we closed it. But that's fine. It ran its course. The big thing was it kept me going with the designs and with the designers, and it kept me sanity during that time. So we were busy. And then out of that, I suppose, 2 of the boys that I was working with have stayed as designers, and I've got 2 marketing girls as well now. So it's really, really good. It's a brilliant business.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that have been used to describe you by people who've got in touch with the show is drive, always wanting the best. And I suppose those entrepreneurial skills came to the fore. You recognized the gap that time. You knew what you needed to do to survive, and you come up with this idea, which I think is fantastic. And like, there is so much of a crossover in rallying in particular and in business. And the interesting thing I find with you is maybe you're probably the opposite to maybe a Donna Kelly or a Declan Boyle, who maybe built up a business and then went rallying. Whereas you're kind of building that and building it. You're probably had to do it very well, I'd say, for a good 10 to 15 years. And then you make the decision to take the step. Like, so, I mean, it really is a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the team that I'd built up around the early 90s would open an office in America. I mean, we're busy, but a lot of faith and confidence in them. But after 98, there were things needed, you know, it just needed to take another step. And I couldn't afford not to be in the business and focused on 100% for it to be able to do that. You know, we opened up a new facility, a new factory, which was a big step. And we took on some new distribution partners globally. And that just needed me at the helm to do that. So I couldn't do both. You know, and as the rally, and I absolutely love it. But the business had to get the priority.
Yeah, because like, it's one of the burning questions that I have, and we'll come to it in a moment's time, right? But can I just talk to you about the period of time you were involved? So it's less than a decade, right? And you've had some great days. This is before we even come to Killarney. So can you talk to me about your period of time and what stands out for you before we actually talk about Killarney in 98?
I mean, as a cub, I used to go down and borrow friends' cars at Kirkerson and race. There was a couple of friends of mine, 2 Keiths, had 1600 Sports, and they used to go down to Kirkerson and run around. But they were only allowed to do, I think, 6 out of the 8 potential races in the day. And I used to borrow their cars and do the other 2 spare ones, each free. And that was great fun. And so I got a real taste for, I suppose, racing cars at that stage. But then, and that's way back. I mean, that was, God, I wouldn't like to think that was late 70s. But I then went on to navigate for a friend of mine, Alan Fraser. Now, I have to say, I was an abysmal navigator. Behind a tree, you know, I was shocking. I was terrible. But we had some good fun and went away, and, you know, we did a lot of the circuit in Killarney and Galway, and I got to know the rallies. But we really didn't. It was Group N back then in RS 2000. We didn't break too much down. A few good results. Once in the Ulster, we did pretty well. But I would have thought I was holding him back more than anything else. My navigation skills were shocking, and I was blind rallying in those days. So I packed it in and started the business, and then left it for a decade, and saw a car in the paper for sale, a Toyota Corolla front-wheel drive. And I thought, well, sure, I'm not going to buy it, I'm just going to look. ended up buying it, and then the worst thing possible happened. I did well in the first rally. Won the class. Everybody else must have not finished or something, but I won the class, and that sucked me in. So I got started and hooked up with John McLean, and it all got worse from there, you know. I bought a 2 Toms off Davy Greer, and I have to say I was absolutely crap. Front wheel drive and rear wheel drive, I was a shocking driver. Like I nearly never did well at all, never featured, but I just enjoyed it. You know, the rear wheel drive's good fun, even on the tower, just rear, just flying as far as you can. But I never had any real success. I mean, I would bend it more often than finish. And then for some reason, I went 4-wheel drive, and it just all clicked. You know, first with a Sierra Cosworth, I used to call it the taxi, and then got a wee Escort Cosworth, and Group N seemed to do all right in the national stuff. And then talking to John McLean, he said, "Come on, let's hit it harder here." And I bought the Legacy from Birdie in, I think it was 90, must be 94, about 94, and that was just a love. It's been used to Group N, transmission, and then just getting the Legacy with the dog box and the proper, suspension. It was a dream, like a dream. You could just let her go. It was brilliant.
And contrary to popular belief, you're telling me off air that in actual fact, even though you won Killarney in the Impreza 555, that you actually rathered the Legacy. Yeah,
by the time they got to 98, they put restrictors on the cars, and I think the Legacy had more get up and go. And certainly off the line, she kicked you harder. She really bit her out of the stops, and there was a lot more movement in it. There was a lot more flow. The Impreza I felt was quite staid. Now they got a lot more fancy later on, and maybe I wasn't good at driving the Impreza, but I always enjoyed the Legacy more. There was just a bit more pendulum, a bit more popping and buying, a bit more drifting, and it was just a lot more fun.
Yeah. I suppose looking back at that period just before we do come to Killarney again or whatever, which has a nice little running story to it as well. I mean, Killarney wasn't the first thing you won. You mentioned class wins, but you win on a national as well in 95. Did you win Cavan?
I think I won Cavan a couple of times, and Monaghan and a few of the others. Yeah. I mean, once I got into the Legacy, she was a really fit car, and yeah, I mean, there was a few other boys had Legacy stuff around, but if you kept their nose clean, you could do well. And you see,
the thing is, I get what you're saying with the Legacy too, because even when the 555s come out, and geez, actually occasionally I think back when the first WRC Impreza started coming to Ireland, you would still see the Legacies mixing. I think Daniel Doherty was one that would stand out. Paul Harris a couple of times was mixing it as well.
Yeah, fit drivers.
So there's a lot to be said for the Legacy still, even though the technological advancements had come on. I know you mentioned the restrictor part, but in comparison to a WRC, there was no comparison, and they were still able to keep in with them like whatever,
Yeah, and they were brilliant. They were a pleasure to drive. But the big difference was stepping out of the Group N. And you were changing gears and that there with 2 fingers, just trying to really be very delicate with it. And then Mark, Birdie's son, came down. We're doing Cavan, and he come down on the Friday night with the car when I bought it. I was doing it on the Saturday, and on the Friday night we went down the main street outside the White Horse, and he showed me some stand and starts, some launch. There's no launch control back then, but you had to take the foot off the clutch sideways. And then the thought of doing that in a Group N, you just had in with a bag of bolts. So, and we yelped down the street 2 or 3 times to the delight of all the boys in the bars and all. It was great fun, and the guards as well. It was just a brilliant weekend. And I don't remember if I took it that weekend or not. That was 94, so I can't remember, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. But just the ability to just change the gear the way you want it and use the gears as braking as well as the brakes, which were massive on it, were fantastic. So I love the Legacy. It was just a fantastic car. In the woods as well.
So we'll move on to 98, which is obviously the big year, right? And the one that everyone kind of talks about. So you go to the circuit, you notice a few things that you're not entirely happy with in relation to the car. So talk us through it from that point until the arrival in Killarney then.
I hadn't the car very long. That year I went and got sponsors. So there was an awful lot of work behind the scenes, getting the sponsors, getting the team built up. There was a lot of hospitality. There was a lot of distractions.
Yeah.
But eventually I got the car set up.
Sorry, James, to call across you. Did you look after that yourself as well? A lot of it trying to gather your own budget, or?
Well, I was very, very fortunate. I started late on the previous year to gather up sponsors. And I sent out 5 application packs to 5 companies. And the first 2 came back and said yes. And they gave me the combined budget to buy the car and run it for the year.
Brilliant.
So, it was fabulous. I was not out of pocket at all. It was a fantastic deal they gave me, Cable-Tel and TR Fastenings.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked extremely well for them. Cable-Tel were really pushing very hard, putting in cable in the ground, fiber optics in the ground, Northern Ireland, and just wanted some good PR because they were annoying a lot of people digging up the roads. But they had a huge fleet nationwide across the UK. And by them agreeing to go to L Fuel cards, I got free fuel all year. And by them agreeing to go to a secondary or tertiary brand of Pirelli tires, they got free tires all year from Pirelli. And like the Circuit of Ireland, 39 stages, £100 a tire. We put 4 tires on per stage, and she was doing 5 miles to a litre a mile basically, and it was £5 a litre. It was dear. It was dear then,
Yeah.
You've been getting a run, but that's what I remember the price was. So that took a big sting out of the running costs, and they paid for the rebuilds and all the rest of it. But and you were mentioning there in the circuit, she went out of the box all right, but a lot of people were telling me that it just didn't seem to have the gusto that Bertie and the others in Imprezas had out of the corners. It didn't have the get up and go. I wasn't familiar with the car, so I couldn't have told you.
Yeah.
But nothing to go on. So we packed the engine up and the gearbox up in a box and sent it off at the end of the circuit. And I'm thinking I was 5th in the circuit. I may be wrong. Was it 5th or?
Probably a little. You were up fairly high at one stage, but it might have dropped down a little bit for whatever various different reasons. I think might have kind of gone again from memory.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. Yeah. I can't remember just exactly where I finished up. Maybe it was 7th or something like that. But it was a good event and getting a finish. And I think I tried a few times not to finish, but I got her home and sent it off and got her back, and she did. She felt different, and we went to Killarney. And we just seemed to be on the pace better than we had been on the circuit, and we were mixing it, which was great because I hadn't really done a rally for 3 years. It was in the legacy, so stepping into the Impreza and being able to mix it with Austin and Andrew and Bertie and the rest of them, I was pleased.
I'm just laughing there because in relation to Cable-Tel, a lot of people were pretty annoyed about the fact that the roads were being ripped up, but they're not bothered with their car laying tire marks on them at the same time. So people are fickle, aren't they, James?
I got you.
But moving on to the lakes then. I mean, Seamus Coonahan of CRS Pics has been very kind to us because he's dug out some of these at very, very late notice, and he passed on his regards as well. He's great. He's great time for you, and obviously he hasn't spoke to you for years. So I mean, I'm not quite sure where to start, but I'll have a gamble, or I'll have a punt on this one anyway. So that's the famous Shannon hairpin.
Okay.
And on day one, so the sequence of events is as follows. Bertie obviously goes out quite early, and it's pissy enough. This actually could be the second day because I don't remember it being particularly great times on the first day, right? But what people tend to forget is a lot of people talk about Bertie going out early and different things happening, which okay, don't get me wrong. If you're James Leckey and someone goes that's seated ahead of you and someone of that caliber, well, calling it straight, it's an advantage. There's one less to worry about. So, well, what people forget is at the end of day one, there was only 14 or 15 seconds between you and Austin. Yeah. So it was game on. So you must have came away after day one thinking to yourself, geez, we're in a pretty good spot here. And a lot can happen, obviously, on the second day down in Rally Lakes,
Yeah, that was new territory for us. And, we really hadn't been as competitive as that before. There've been moments, where we'd had decent stage times on previous events, but really never been in and been comfortable at that pace, been okay with it. And Andrew couldn't have been far away. And Andrew must have been, Andy Nesbitt must have been at it as well. So yeah, I mean, it was just it was nice to be there. I definitely had with the car driving better and so on. I definitely was putting more effort into it, but I was only getting on to what the car was capable of, and in terms of the braking zones and things like that. I was only then beginning to really get into where it was doing it. Otherwise, I would naturally have braked earlier than the car was capable of it.
Mm-hmm. Eamon Boland was very much in the mix as well, and then he had a big off on Carroll Lake, not too far into it.
Right, and the Escort.
Yeah. I'd say possibly cold tires. It's definitely, oh man, it's only a couple of 100 yards now from the start, I think, where he went off.
Okay,
and
yeah, that would suggest that.
In recent times, Ray Breen actually in the Killarney Historics, I think, albeit with the stage run the other way, might have went off in a similar spot. So Carroll Lake notoriously a difficult enough stage. But can you remember, James, as best you can, even though it is quite some time ago, how that day was panning out for you and what you were thinking as the day was panning out?
I think was to try and keep. I mean, anytime I've had any success in the past, it's just by trying to avoid issues and keep a good pace going. There's one stage, I think it's called Ballabima, and I particularly like that stage. And
tight and twisty.
Aye, and there's a downhill section where if you get her in the right, if you get her bouncing the right way, she'll flow nicely for you, and you can get down through it quite quickly. Even though it is nip and tuck, and I think I got a fastest on that and something, and that just spurred me on to just keep it tidy and keep the nose clean, but push on and brake late and stuff like that. And we were just very fortunate; we didn't have any significant issues, and didn't put any marks in the car. So it went well, and we were still in there. Now something tells me that Austin was out in front by maybe more than 14 towards the end of the day. And I'm, age and memory and all that, but I think he might have clipped it on one of the last stages, if not the last stage, and dropped a few seconds, which what was let me through. And I don't know whether
wasn't it the broke a wishbone, I think it was, and
was that what it was? Was that what it was?
And then there was obviously time penalties, and wasn't there traffic going back into Killarney and different things. So there was obviously a little bit of controversy emerging. Okay. So I'm not sure how this is panning out in your mind then as all this is going on. You're probably like, jeepers.
There was a problem, which I'd never encountered before. There was a problem on a road section. And we went down, we were all, tire warming back then was standard issue. You just went down the road as you were, in the last mile or so before the stage, you weaved her about a wee bit. And you could weave her quite aggressively. And there was nothing coming the other way. You weren't too worried. And there was a narrow road we were heading down, and we came across, we saw something in the distance, and it was a car pulled into the side. And when we approached the car, it was a young learner girl under instruction going the wrong way down this wee narrow road, and the boys were coming at her with warming their tires. And now they were stationing when we arrived, but they must have come over a crest, and some of the cars in front of us, who I can't remember who they were, but she probably got a bit frightened, and she was in tears. I suggested, listen, turn around. Don't be going any further down that road. Get out of here, or park her up and leave it for 15 minutes, and then it mightn't be so bad. But there was a problem with that later on, because there was potential penalties, and they were trying to figure out who was it caused the issue.
Yeah,
and there was a few names in the hat.
Right.
And I know it wasn't us, but I wasn't saying who I thought it was.
Yeah.
But the organizers kind of, from the description she gave of the car and everything else, were pointing the finger my direction. But I know she'd stopped, and it was the cars in front of us that had been the issue, from what I could understand. But I'm not saying who that was or whatever it was. But
yeah,
that was an issue that was floating about at the finish line, and there was question mark of penalties, and that went on. That went on for a while into the evening and so on. So it was a bit strange for a while, a bit surreal.
Yeah, because I was actually at the finish ramp. I was only 7 or 8 years of age, right? And hoping not make you feel too old now. Hopefully we'll still be friends when it's all over, right? But yeah, I mean, all this is going on, and I'm actually just trying to grab the wee image here as well, just so we can pull it up. And again, Seamus Gonahan's been very, very good indeed in supplying these particular images. But like nobody knew, and even if you go back on the RPM footage, the scene is set beautifully by Plum Tyndall and Gary Gillespie and the crew, as always, as they tended to do. And I mean, we've never seen the likes of it since. They were just like poetry in motion. I think it was just everything was captured so well. But as the photo makes its way onto the back end here, which hopefully won't take too much longer, we have an infamous thing going on. Now we have it here. We've a coin toss. So all this is going on. Who comes up with the idea of a coin toss and all this? And no better man than Andrew Nesbitt, I suppose, to step in the middle and try act as I don't know. We won't say coffee in hand, but some sort of peacekeeper here.
You know, I can see that going on there, but I don't remember that playing any role in the outcome of the event.
Okay.
We've got some dogs going through.
He's claiming lies.
Well, they're all the way out there. We've dogs here, by the way. I don't remember that coin toss paying any bearing in the outcome of the event.
Okay.
My understanding is it was really a Stewart's Inquiry did it, and from what I remember, and I don't know if I should be saying this or not, I had to sit in front of Plum and do 2 versions of the finish.
Okay. I've heard something about this before. Yeah, I think you're okay to say it now all these years later. Yeah.
He said you have to do one with you as you're the winner, and then have to follow up and do one with you as being thrown out of the event.
Oh, thrown out?
I think that was the outcome, or a penalty that would have put us way down the running order or something. I don't know. I can't remember, but it was
okay.
It went on until about 11 o'clock that night, and we sat with the organisers. We sat outside a room and they were inside debating, and we went in and talked to them and come out. And I don't think anybody had any real knowledge of what occurred during the day, but there was a risk of protest or something going on. And then they just got the word, "It's yours, James. You've got it." And which I think was probably the right thing, because that's what the stage times dictated. You know, when it wasn't put down to any, there was no penalties applied to anybody, which is probably the right thing. So it was on the stages at the event that the event was, won and lost.
Okay, so that's how they decided. Now, some of these aren't actually displaying the right way. I've downloaded them arseways, and that's my particular problem. But so what you're saying is you get to do this, spray the champagne, you're the winner of the event, but it's not quite sunshine and rainbows at this particular moment then. There's a little bit more to it. It goes on long into the evening, like.
It does, but I mean, yeah.
So were you spraying the champagne, James, thinking, Jesus, like, is this tainted a little bit kind of a thing, or what are you thinking in that moment?
I knew that I wasn't at fault and wasn't in the wrong. So I was taking it that, no, I'd won the event fair and square, and that I was happy to accept it in that point in time. And then would fight a corner later on if I had to. Fortunately, we didn't really have to. I think it was just whatever people they talked to, they worked it out. But it was a bit strange given the 2 interviews with Plum. When I was talking to Plum yesterday, it didn't come up, but it was a bit strange given those 2 interviews. Like, it was great stuff said, but it was just strange. It was a bit surreal. It was difficult to express the emotion of winning. Yeah,
and you kind of strike me as the type of person who would wear the heart on the sleeve and would just be like that anyway. So for you to try and maybe fabricate an interview, couldn't have been easy, like.
I know you're on the spotlight and you wanted to do the best of it. And there was people there was crowds there, and you were trying to put the champagne up and do it right and show it. But I can't remember if Austin had to do that as well. I don't remember that now. You have no photographs of it?
Well, I don't know if Austin sprayed champagne or anything like that, but we have this, and we have the victory. I can't think of the name of that around your neck. The object, you probably know what it is.
The laurel wreath.
Yes. So that's around you.
It used to be a florist.
From memory, I don't remember Austin doing that as well. But
no, I think it was given to us, but there was a Stewart's Inquiry to be happening later on, and then it became a bit strange. But Plum had to do the 2 interviews.
Yeah,
You know.
I wonder did Austin do a second interview as well? I never asked him that because we had Austin on a couple of years back, and he obviously thought about this as well, and he'd mentioned that in the heat of the hunt that the 1-2 was reversed, I think, in his words or whatever the case was, and he said what he said was, and I'm paraphrasing now, right? So I'm not quoting a word for word, but I'm nearly certain to paraphrase him. He said along the lines of James Leckey rightly won the rally.
Well, that's kind of him. That's kind of him, because that would be my position now. Him having that mechanical problem was good fortune to me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think if he hadn't had that misfortune, then he would have taken the event on the day by whatever margin. You know, it might have been a big margin, but he would have taken it.
Yeah.
You know, because I wouldn't have caught myself really ever as quick as Austin. You know, Austin Birdie and Andrew and Donegal, I wouldn't get near him. And who else would have put? You know, Kenny. You know, those boys. The rest of them, I would, you know, feel I was at it. And I think Killarney that year, I was good. I had good fortune. I had good fortune, and the stages worked for me, and somebody was being kind. There were times, you know, when you got her gathered up, let's say, and she was facing the right road.
Do you know what I think is gas, actually? I've kind of left this out and I'll bring it up again, and apologies. I think actually if I pull down this banner for a quick moment, I might get the full picture here. Yes, indeed we do, right? Go. So that's a great photo from Seamus Cunningham. But you can see now, James, this pans out in 2023 with all the nonsense we've seen over the last couple of years on social media. You see Mr. George Miller there beside you, who used to sit with Andrew Nesbitt, of course. And you know what people would be saying? They'd be saying, oh, the coin toss. Sure, Miller used to sit with Nesbitt. Sure, Nesbitt shouldn't have been tossing that coin. Could you just imagine if that was today? I guarantee you someone would say it. Guarantee you. But, I mean, Andrew must have been delighted as well, because George had obviously sat with him before James. And, like, I just think that's a quality photo for so many different reasons, like, you know.
Well, I mean, that's a good bunch of guys. And I'm a big, I know Andy fairly well, and we're going to we're going to the MotoGP this year together in Barcelona. Philip Young and Andre and a few other Dark Knights, you know, but it'll be good fun. It'll be good fun. So I mean, I wouldn't say Austin, but I would keep in touch with Andre, you know.
Yeah, and like in relation to Austin, right? Because he's so competitive, unbelievably competitive. But everyone talks about the respect then afterwards. So like a completely different character, and some would say that they are often the same character with the helmet on and with the helmet off. But it just seemed, from talking to so many people that were up against him at the time, that he was two different characters and just really wanted to win. So obviously you saw glimpses of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use Killarney as an example there. You know, I was glad I was in second place for the vast majority of that rally, and it wasn't Austin behind me. and Birdie, if he was about today, would tell you the same thing, because he lost the Circuit of Ireland at the very last thing. Austin was miles behind him and never, ever, ever gave up. Never gave up. You know, and took a minute break in the last stage so he could take the time out of him. And he took the time out of him. You know, it was like Austin never, it was the one thing I remembered about. He never, ever, ever gave up. He drove her hard to the end. And that's possibly what happened in Killarney, because he maybe didn't need to drive that hard in the last stage, you know?
Well, look, James, great times. And I hope, really, just before we wrap it up, that we're talking about some more interesting times for James Leckey over the not too distant future, because, you know, you mentioned you're in 5 Mile Town and stuff like that. But we touched on this question earlier in relation to you going after the business pursuit, but I never asked you how difficult the decision it was for you to decide, I've won Killarney, I'm after going fourth in Donegal. Doing pretty good for myself here. Irish rallying is in a very healthy state. You know, some would say that's probably in around the golden era, I should say, going from maybe 97, 98 upwards for the few years after the foot and mouth as well. So that can't have been easy, despite the fact that you knew it was in the best interest. Like, you would have taken a bit of time to think about it, surely.
Yeah, I did, and it was a big decision, because I would have loved to have gone across and done UK events. I would love to have gone across and done some of the Scottish and Welsh forests and Cumbria and so on as well. I think that would have been really good fun. But the business pressures were such, and ironically, winning Killarney scratched an itch. I'd meant to tick that box. I'd won an event, and I just thought, right, well, I've achieved everything. It made it easier from the point of view that I've achieved everything I wanted to achieve. The idea of doing the Irish Championship and trying to win the championship itself, I don't know if I had the belief that I could have done that. And I think I would have gone for more fun by going across and going and doing the woods. I love the gravel. Over in the UK, and done a season there. But that was just for fun. And in the end, that took the pressure off from the point of view that work had to be a priority. And I loved work as well. I mean, the work I did, I just loved it. Absolutely adored it. So it was a big decision, but not a difficult decision. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. And it's mad because every action has a reaction. So if you think about the fact that maybe you don't win Killarney and you keep going, you might have some really enjoyable times overseas and stuff to talk about, but business could suffer. And you look back at that now and with the benefit of hindsight, I made a pretty good decision. Everything happens for a reason, doesn't it?
It was the right call at the time, and I'm glad I did it. I did miss it, but I'm glad I did it. Yeah.
So a few more itches to scratch now. So it's not it's not too bad. I don't know, James. Could we call this a midlife crisis or?
Not that late for that.
Oh, very good, very good.
No, listen, James, a bit late for midlife. A late life crisis, we'll call it.
We'll be kind of a stick to midlife. We'll take a few years off you there. James, an absolute privilege to have a chat with you. Really, really enjoyed it.
Great, thank you.
We'll give a good shout out to our mutual friend, Mr. Seamus Conahan. You can actually see his calendar there in the corner. It's not so late to buy a few of them, actually. So,
good to hear from you.
It's been super sport. Enjoy 5 Mile Town, and hopefully we see
plenty more. Hopefully I will.
Yeah. All right, James. Thanks a million. Thanks for coming on the Irish Rally Podcast.
All right. Great.
This is the Irish Rally Podcast, brought to you in association with Techntools, your dedicated tools provider focusing on diagnostic test equipment and specialised tools. Visit Techntools.ie for more information, and SVS Productions.